Welcome back, Mighty Vandals, to Tubs at the Club, brought to you this week by Snake River Stampede Whiskey, but we'll tell you a little bit more about that later in the show. We are the Idaho Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I'm your most of the time host, Dallas Hammer, joined today by the brave, the bold, the Brian Marceau.
Dude, it's so damn wild. Week 0. Kind of okay with us having this 1 week exhale before the real show begins, but that time of the year that we look for, that we all set our entire damn lives around, is just around the corner, man. It's hard to be doing better.
And last but not least, the man in Moscow, producer redacted, Marten Heemstra.
It's damn good to finally have actual Idaho football preview. I see a cat in the background. It's damn good back. Students are back. It's getting back to normal, which means we're 1 week closer to Vandal football.
Speaking of it being 1 week closer to Vandal football, if you were here last week, you heard us do our preview episode of the Big Sky Football Conference, which means today, boys, we are breaking down the Idaho Vandals. Today is the Idaho preview episode. Brian, you're the professor. Give us the subtext. Tell us what we need to know about the Idaho Vandals before we begin.
Which, one, so that we don't have to bore people by repeating the same caveat 16,000 times. I think the best subtext for us to use, and I think this is going to match what most of our listeners are going to feel, is, hey, look at how last season ended, final 8 finish. Look at the preseason polls, both locally at the Big Sky level and at the national level too. Media and coaches polls in the Big Sky put Idaho as number 3. That will year in, year out translate to finishing somewhere between 7 and 10 nationally. And look at national pollsters right now. Most have Idaho slotted somewhere between 7, 8, and 9. So I think, hey, that's where we should have all of our comparisons and all of our everything we're going to try to interpret now heading into the season is with the subtext of, if Idaho is going to reach that current expectation of top 10 nationally, around 3rd in the Big Sky, competing for a playoff bye.
Dallas, this is a different year. This is a different year, guys. 2 years ago, we were talking about Jason Eck and turning this around from the absolute dumpster fire it was under Paul Petrino. Last year came in with, hey, had a pretty good season, but didn't ultimately mean anything. They didn't win a playoff game. Year 2, they took that extra step, had 2 games in the Kibbe Dome. Year 3 is kind of that year we've been circling for a while now, that this was the year we thought Jason Eck was going to be able to take that one final step into the upper echelon of the FCS. Again, the national polls are reflecting that. Top 3 in the Big Sky Conference absolutely reflects that. So, Marten, if we're going to make the case for Idaho, what are you expecting to see?
I just think it's everything we saw this spring is going to go right for Idaho. Kind of like the Jack Lane. I don't know why I almost messed it up. But like I think he takes the step that all us Vandal fans have all seen this spring, and the fill-ins for all our transfers play to the level that we all think they can play up to.
Yeah, I think that what you need to look at first in making the case for Idaho as a national power is you got to look at the defensive side of the ball, which Idaho was strong defensively, one of the top defenses in the Big Sky, which is going to translate year in, year out to being one of the top defenses nationally. And it is the defensive side of the ball where last season, a lot of young guys played key roles. And as far as, experience, hey, you guys all know the cornerback room is essentially almost a tabula rasa minus Andrew Marshall. But up front, that front 7, the overwhelming majority of contributors from the 2023 season are back. And honestly, the defense looks like it's in a better place than it was last year. Never mind the experience. There were a lot of meaningful injuries that pushed underclassmen up a level relative to where they started when the season began. So, I mean, you want to look at the defensive line. All the guys we were terrified of leaving last year are back. We got Dallas Afalava, 5 sacks. He's a true sophomore. He's back. He was a single name I was most terrified of leaving in the transfer portal. Keyshawn James Newby on the edge, senior, 5 sacks. He's back. Malachi Williams actually he was slotted as a starter to begin last season on the other side of the line. He's back, and he might be a depth piece, but a starter from last year, back. Sam Brown from Spokane. He hasn't been a star in the sense of, he's not leading the team and getting to the quarterback, but plays meaningful snaps. He's back. Jakari Larmond who was the run stopper as a tackle. He based off we've been told, he is now kind of second string, which is great news. And Amari Notice and Zach Krotzer are 2 guys who both had lots of big moments last season as redshirt sophomores. They're all back. So the case for Idaho, to me, you have to start defensively, and you have to talk about the returning talent of the front 7, not only back with more experience, but having lived through a lot of injury issues last year. It's just hard to imagine that front 7 that performed well is not going to be equal to or better than what we saw in 2023. And last year, the defense in the second half of the season carried Idaho.
Yeah, I think that everything is going to start with the defense. You'd expect the defense has to at least perform to the level they did last season, if not be better. It stinks that Rob Orich has moved on, but we expect good things out of Dan Jackson. Eck wanted him on the original staff a couple years ago. So I would assume, and from the things we've heard, especially Brian, in the interviews that you got from Media Day, it doesn't sound like there's a ton of change to the defensive scheme. There's obviously some new wrinkles that will be involved, but it's not going to be too crazy. When you look at that defensive line roster and you see 7 different guys that had a ton of playing time last year, that's going to be huge. You're going to be able to survive any sort of injuries you get there, just because you have so many bodies. And then there's a bunch of sophomores and redshirt freshmen that don't have a ton of playing time. That probably doesn't necessarily mean they're not any good. We're just looking at, this is one of the deepest position groups probably across the entire FCS, much less at Idaho. To buttress that point on the front 7, Brian, it does stink that Trey Thomas graduated. Exree Alexander moved on to the FBS. He's now at UCF. But you did have Matthias Bertram make a bunch of starts last year at linebacker. He's back. Jackson Eck, Dylan Lane, they're both back. They both played a ton. Isaiah King is a guy that the coaching staff says a lot of really good things about. Unfortunately, he only has 24 tackles in his career. He is quite injury prone at this point. He's never finished a full season. Again, that front 7 is going to be doing a lot of the work. So the corner room that we don't know what to expect, don't forget Dan Jackson coached corners before. This is probably going to be an area, maybe not of weakness, but certainly, or maybe not of strength, but certainly not as a weakness. But it goes back to what Martin said. It's Jack Lane and the fill-ins that are going to replace this offense. That's where, to me, everything hinges on this season. And I think this offense is going to be better. Brian, you've hammered this point home so many times. Idaho offensively fell off at the end of last season. Yes, Giovanni McCoy won the Jerry Rice Award as a freshman. Yes, Anthony Woods was incredible. Yes, Hayden Hatton is one of the probably 5 best Vandals to ever play. But it just didn't work when it had to. And now we're expecting, this is projecting, this is making the case for, we've seen Jack Lane twice. Yes, it was against a D2 school, but he played very well in the snaps that mattered. Brian, like that face there. We'll see if the jungle has anything to say about that. 3-headed monster at running back now is not going to mean, hey, as soon as Anthony Woods is dinged up, it's Nick Romano. And if he can't go, you've got really nothing behind them. The receiver room is going to be different. The tight end room is going to be different. We have no idea truly what to expect from the offense. This is all going to be projection. But I just think Jack Lane is going to be able to find the open guy and transition this offense more from the playground style football to, we have a set number of plays. We're going to make the reads. We're going to throw it to the guy that's open. We're going to continue chewing clock just like Idaho has proven to do under Eck for the last couple of years. But I think it's going to be a more efficient offense, and that's what's going to be the key for the Vandals this year.
Yeah, so Dane Moon in the comment section saying, I expect the offense will be 20% better, if not more. Which the other part, we jumped around thematically, which is okay, because it's really hard to talk about this team without hitting what we know and what we don't know almost back to back. But I want to build the case a little bit more for Idaho as justifiably top 8 or 7, and that's where we think they're going to finish. Is on the offensive side of the ball. Jack Lane is both an unknown and a known quantity. What we do know, what we have seen, is that the way Giovanni McCoy and the way Hayden Hatton and Anthony Woods will be replaced is the offense will just simply look different. It will not be the same types of play calls like you said. And who gets the ball is going to be a little bit more spread out. And this is where depth, especially in the running back room, which Idaho did not have last year, is going to be an asset. The other thing that I want to point to about the case for Idaho is last season, point we've belabored because it's hard not to, if you talk about Idaho football a lot, is relative to being a national power. Idaho had easily the worst offensive line of probably the top 10 teams in the nation. In spite of that, Idaho had a great season that even with everyone leaving or having graduated, the big names for people who aren't knee deep, ankle or knee deep in Idaho football, there's a lot of names that outsiders are going to say like, hey, how in God's name are you going to produce? Are you going to replace them? I want to talk about the tight ends. The thing I want to talk about the tight ends is we saw Jake Cox really emerge towards the end of last season. I mean, he's a reliable pass catcher, but really looked like he was finding his footing as a strong blocker. And there's reason to believe that recent transfer to the program, a guy with a really kind of wild backstory, Mike Martinez, transferred from UCLA, but he honestly took like 3 years off, had some significant medical issues. What we've been told so far is Mike Martinez, one, is a beast, 6'7", built. Was told that, of course, any person who misses a couple of years is going to be slow, a little sluggish when they first start off. But that Mike Martinez has looked like a guy who, if he's healthy and if he can make everything work, he is going to be an incredible blocker out of the tight end, which, hey, that would give us, we know then, 2 very strong blocking tight end options. We know Alex Moore is a good pass catcher. We know from Jason Eck on the show. No, there's some health limitations, but he's physically at 100%, but he's probably going to be on a little bit of a pitch count, compared to what was understood of Alex Moore towards the start. But improved blocking out of the tight ends and natural growth from a very young offensive line, which we know is a little deeper, just based off of the fact that Aiden Knappich should be back, but we also learned that why am I drawing a blank on the name? Dallas, the dude the O lineman who just received the scholarship, freshman, Martin, you know who I'm talking about, right?
Was it Caden Robnett?
Caden Robnett, yeah. Caden Robnett, depth piece. If he's a starter, we didn't graduate starting O lineman last season, so we know we added at least one who's going to replace, I believe, Leighton Vining as a starter. That means improved depth. If the O line can buy Jack Lane enough time, and if the tight ends are developing enough to improve the blocking game, that to me is the case for what Idaho needs to be in that top 10, because they still did it anyway last year with a struggling and not healthy enough O-line. And if that group can just be marginally better, there's a ceiling on Idaho's offense this season that we didn't see in the second half of 2023.
The final point I want to put on it is the offensive line. We've got a bunch of comments in the comment section about the O-line should be better than it's been. Bradley LaPlante saying the left tackle, the right tackle return, right guard returns, returning center won't be the starter. Most minutes returned of the position groups. If you look at the offensive line roster here, guys, there are 3 guys that are upperclassmen, and only 2 of them are from before Jason Eck. This is a very, very, very young room. Eck has talked about it many times. They're not quite where he wants them to be in year 3, and he hopes that they're going to take that as kind of a rallying cry to get better here right at the last days of the fall. But when you have a young offensive line and you're redoing essentially your entire offense, it makes sense that you're going to see a lot more out of the tight ends. There are 10 tight ends on the roster. I know last year Idaho played very heavy 11 personnel. I would, again, we've been talking about it and projecting it for a while here. I would expect to see a lot more 2 tight end personnel. It just makes sense. You have a younger line. You're going to need a little bit of help blocking. You have better running backs now, or maybe not better running backs, but you have more depth in that room. So you're going to be able to at least move the ball on the ground a little bit more. And then when you look at X history, again, we broke this down in the spring at SDSU in his final year, 89 receptions, over 1,000 yards and 12 touchdowns out of their top 2 tight ends. Last year, all tight ends combined at Idaho for 39 receptions, 502 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And then again, Teron Ivey Jr., who was over half of that, is now gone. We don't know, I think, exactly who's going to be. We've got more. We've got Cox, Mike Martinez. There's, again, if he can stay healthy, there's some hope there. There's a bunch of other guys that are just redshirt sophomores and redshirt freshmen that we just haven't seen. I would expect to see a lot more out of those guys. Again, as you'd expect to see 2 receivers out there, 2 tight ends out there, and Eck really commit to this ball control, really efficient offense. Hopefully what that means is, again, Idaho is just going to continue doing the same thing that they've been doing. But again, with Alex Moore on a snap count, Mike Martinez has injury problems. Jake Cox, yes, all conference tight end. But then behind him, Chance Bogan probably has the most playing time of anybody, maybe Mason Minnie. And they got in a couple games last year.
Yeah, Mason Minnie's been the one that Jason Eck has been talking about his depth above Chance Bogan so far. Last thing for the case for is that I want to talk about Jack Lane in a second too. Because look, for Giovanni McCoy he obviously was fine for having Hayden Hatton and Jermaine Jackson as the top 2 guys to receive targets and not really that much beyond there, which is to say, I guess a better way to say it is Giovanni McCoy last year was surrounded by the kind of people he needed to have around him for the type of reads Giovanni McCoy can make. If you're going to lose all Big Sky or all time level talents like Idaho did, you're obviously going to replace it with multiple guys contributing at different levels, but that also means you need a quarterback who's comfortable progressing through his reads. From what we've seen of Jack Lane, he is the type of guy Idaho needs to be able to replace the production of guys like Hayden Hatton getting open all the time by being able to hit the running back a little bit more, being able to hit short passes to tight ends a little bit more, being able to hit over the middle a little bit more, being able to cycle through his reads quickly so that defenses are able to less cue on a guy or 2 at a time. And that's what we have out of Jack Lane. Obviously, there's another side to talk about there. But if Idaho is going to have the type of offense it needs, we hit the O-line part already, but the distribution of yards is going to have to be different, losing Anthony Woods too, and replacing Anthony Woods with 3 starter level running backs. Okay, sounds good. Replacing Giovanni McCoy with a guy who's going to see the field and make quicker decisions. Good. That's what this O-line needs as well, to not have to block quite as long. The wide receivers, look, we've heard promising things about guys like Mark Hamper. Jordan Dwyer's got to be healthy. We've seen him be promising. The fact of the wide receiver itself is less concerning to me because year in, year out, good teams replace good receivers. Idaho just uniquely has an all-timer that we're going to replace, and you don't do that with 1 guy. You do it with 3 guys stepping up and doing that production piecemeal, and that's what Idaho has the talent to do.
And I mean, that's realistically, that's what good football programs do. And that's something that's obviously very foreign to most of us because, again, we're off of the first 2 back-to-back winning seasons in the last 20-some years for the Vandals. I have talked myself into thinking that this is going to be one of the best teams we're ever going to see. But let's throttle this back a little bit. If we're making the case against Idaho, Martin, where do things go wrong?
I'll kind of state the obvious. It's probably going to be offensive line. And I also probably think the running back situation doesn't really, not one person steps up and kind of takes that lead is the big ones for me. And I think the obvious one probably being like injuries. might be a big one, but that might derail. It's probably gonna be what's gonna deal with it. Like Vandal superfan Patrick, I'm not gonna try and pronounce your last name, said it's got to be the offensive line. He is right.
Yeah, that if Idaho, then just to say the subtext one time, none of us here thinks that if Idaho has some things not work out, no one says this is a bad football team. This is the case against Idaho being a top 10 team. And the O-line is, to me, absolutely where it begins and ends. As much as we talked about the production of Idaho in the second half of 2023 being underwhelming relative to national expectation or national understanding, Idaho had very high-end talent that was able to make up for offensive line deficiencies with the athleticism of Giovanni McCoy, the ability of Anthony Woods to make people miss and get yards after first contact, the way Hayden Hatton dropped damn near nothing, and the way Jermaine Jackson both was great on special teams, but also was a really good number 2 wide receiver. This is not to say Idaho has no one who can develop into that top end talent, but we certainly don't have evidence right now to say that Idaho just replaced Anthony Woods with someone who will be better than Anthony Woods. We don't have any evidence to say that there's talent comparable to Hayden Hatton lining up as the number 1 receiver heading into 2024. So if the O-line struggles, it just doesn't gel, if it has injury issues that Idaho still, even with better depth at the O-line, Idaho does not have that much margin for error to go down a starter or a couple starters. And I don't think it'll be as dramatic this year as it was in 2023, but hey, we all saw against Albany, Aiden Knappett goes down. It didn't feel like one guy went down with that injury. It felt like 2.5 went down with the production, with the guys who were able to come back in. So the way this doesn't work out is some of the development on depth is more like the low end starter for Idaho is where we're deeper, not guys who might start at other schools as well. Or we have injury issues, and that's where you start to run into problems with, can they give redshirt sophomore Jack Lane enough time when Jack Lane's not going to buy time with his legs? Do we have a running back who is going to be able to make people miss if there's penetration, right off the bat? Is this going to be a team that the line is not strong enough and it gets behind the sticks and suddenly you have a lot more 3rd and longs than Idaho is comfortable for? And to me, that I don't care who the wide receivers are right now. I think all of that starts, all your questions and what you're looking at are going to be answered not in week 1, but in week we'll see a little bit in week 2, some week 3 or 4 of what has the Idaho O-line truly become under year 3 of Jason Eck.
I wanted the last 4 comments in the YouTube. Bradley LaPlante, wide receivers is the concern, but Slice is smart enough to play to whatever our strengths are. Nate Mink, loss of Hayden Hatton and Jermaine Jackson are by far the biggest concern. Max Antouche, we talk about the offensive line being a limitation, but even if they haven't improved much, do we think it could realistically be worse than last year? And finally, Captain 58, if we are relying on Lane to be a quick distributor, we are going to need him on the field. Offensive line problems will not bode well for what we need this year. I want to kind of hit all of those in the same group here. I think, and here's Patty in the comment section. Patty Frakes, Max, I think the concern is stylistically Jack Lane is less likely to have great success behind a sketchy OL versus Vonnie and not having a guy like Hatton to lob it to when shit hits the fan. That is the big concern. Obviously, losing Hatton and Jackson is one of the best receiver duos you're ever going to see at the school. That is going to be extraordinarily hard to replace. Those two could be back this year, and if the offensive line hasn't improved, it's not going to change anything. And not even necessarily the improvement. I think it's that the health has to be what's improved. Yes, you want the ceiling of that offensive line to really grow. Brian, as you said earlier, certainly the worst of the offensive lines that made it to the final 8 of the FCS last year. But it's that depth pieces. That's what you want to see build, and then hopefully the cream of the crop will rise and grow and become a upper echelon position group. But that's what I think it's gonna come down to the offensive line. The receivers will figure themselves out. And if they don't, it's probably because the offensive line was never able to get Lane enough time to get the ball out. That's the biggest concern for me. Patty Frake's biggest, that would be the case for the OL. Regression would be the injuries. Tom Kendall saying, I do think the offensive line will be better than last year, but they have to stay healthy. That's, again, that's the whole linchpin of this, guys. That's why there's 20 offensive linemen on the roster. I think Eck has known that for a very long time. This is where things needed to improve immediately. We've seen it happen. I'm hoping we're going to see some guys that are going to come out of nowhere and just take strides in the middle of the season. Going into his freshman year, none of us were thinking Aiden Knappich was going to be a starting left tackle, and then all of a sudden he's been holding the position down for multiple years and is certainly, in my opinion, the most important member of the offensive line as it stands today. Hopefully we get another couple guys that are going to blow up like that. But right now it's what we hope is, if it's the same or similar starting five, it's hoping that guys 6 through 10 have taken a step from where they were before. That's what this entire season is going to land on for Idaho. If that depth is not there and it's similar to what it was last year, one guy goes down, you might be able to cover it. 2 guys go down, good luck. 3 guys go down, well, Vonnie, good luck. You better roll out of the pocket immediately. That's when we're going to start seeing struggles, because that's not Jack Lane's game.
And so we've hit both ends. Now I do want to, one thing I want to touch on just for a second is there's a few unknowns that I just think it's not possible yet to gauge how that's going to move the needle, either the case for Idaho or the case against Idaho. And this first one's a 10-second conversation. Ricardo Chavez, kicker and punter, is gone. He was a Ricardo Chavez when he was on, and which was the majority of his senior season, was an All-American level kicker. He absolutely bailed out Idaho multiple times throughout the last season with his leg. Right now, the kicking room is Owen Forsman, true freshman from Lakeland. Then we have 2 kicker-punter combos of Owen Admins, freshman from Laurel, Montana, and Cameron Pope, a redshirt sophomore kicker-punter. I'm not yet clear on what exactly those role designations are going to be. But Chavez was a radically improved punter from his junior year to his senior year. We just don't know what we're going to get out of those. But the kicker punter absolutely matters. And that itself can swing a couple games. I have no idea if teams are going to be smart enough to not kick it to Abraham Williams, who best kick returner in the history of the Big Sky. But when he was at Weber, people still kicked in the ball sometimes. And those two parts of special teams to me are kind of the biggest, like, just objective unknowns. No way to prognosticate what they will be and how that matters. Dallas, any other unknowns to you think it's worth hammering?
I do want to say my money's on Owen Forsman. I don't know what it is in the water over there in Rathdrum, but they know how to kick footballs. But they've done it for quite a while now. So my money's on him, and hopefully he's going to be fairly solid. But as far as unknowns, Brian, we've kind of touched on it. We don't know what we're really going to hear out of the tight end room. Like, there's no real production here coming back. I mean, again, nothing against Jake Cox and Alex Moore in Moore's very limited time and Cox's time primarily as a blocker. Outside of those 2 guys, we're talking about 8 of the 10 guys in the room that really have no stats to their name. Even Mike Martinez only has a handful of catches in his career at UCLA before, again, he missed multiple seasons with injury. So who knows what we're going to see out of that? Who truly knows what we're going to see out of the receiver room? Those are the big unknowns. And then, Brian, like you said, I do want to shout out LJ Harm. It's in the comment section. Patty Frake saying LJ Harm should be the punter. Marten jumping in to say he's got a leg and he was booming punts in the spring. I don't see him listed on the roster, but that's probably because I don't know how to read. So
he's listed as a punter, not a kicker punter. That would be why you might not see him.
That would be why I missed him.
So, one final thing too is unknown and look, this is unknown for every team every year. Turnovers forced are probably the single most variable stat I can think of defensively. And hey, if that linebacker comes down with that tip pass That really matters. And Idaho was not the same team in 2023, forcing turnovers they were in 2022. There's certainly enough talent that has seen FCS reps. And we also have virtually the entire safety room is back with experience. Big name there being Tommy McCormick. But hey, Dwayne McDougall's back. Kyron Beecham's back too. There are pieces to explain why this team could be more effective at forcing turnovers, which would then help make up for any sort of offensive questions you might have. But those pieces do need to come together. This team had actually, I feel last year, a good amount of potential turnovers the team could have forced. The guys just didn't come. Guys just not coming down with picks the way they did in 2022, or there are some bounces that just did not come the same way they did in 2022. How that works out will be to me a pretty huge deal because this team's, from all we've heard, team seems all in on knowing that has to be better for this team to be what they could be. But turnovers are virtually impossible to project this far out.
But again, it is turnover luck varies from year to year, both in how many you cause and how many you take away. Again, this does seem like it's a great chance for Idaho to turn it around. And then again, Brian, like you mentioned, the defensive back room, while there are those names back, and Andrew Marshall should probably get a good amount of run at corner. The other major corners are going to be Corey Thomas Jr. transfer, KJ Trujillo transfer. Abraham Williams, I believe, came to Idaho specifically because he wanted to play a little corner. He certainly could have gone anywhere else and been a kick returner. I feel like he probably could have been a returner in the Power Four. But hey, if you want to also play corner, Idaho's a great place to come do that.
With that said, Dallas, I think we've got a season we need to walk through. But there's one more place I think we got to hit on before we get into the immediacy of week 1 next week.
I think, Brian, you're right, because it is the last time of the summer, guys. If you're looking for an all-inclusive week-long vacation that is going to be fantastic, don't look past the backyard. Hughes River Expeditions has been vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they are ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or the Selway. You could even check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, or bitches, if you're asking Brian. Run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs. And guys, I say this every week, and I emphasize it every week. Fish some of the most remote stretches of river in the entire United States. Just bring your clothes. HRE will handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450. Again, 406-540-4450. Or check them out at hughesriver.com. Thank you, Colin. We love you. Gentlemen, this takes us to the schedule prediction. Bum, bum, bum. Hopefully we're not going to get sued for that. Marten, let's rip this Band-Aid off, baby. Idaho versus Oregon next week at Autzen Stadium. Again, Oregon being, number 3 in the FBS? Who do we got?
This hat should be the ceiling where I'm picking. I grew up a devout Husky fan, like the former helper of the show and writer on the website, Sean Kramer would say. He was a huge Vandal Husky fan. I can't pick the Ducks. I am going to pick Idaho because fuck the Ducks.
You know, in a different podcast and in a different term, I'd be a little bit upset about that, Marten, because I love the Ducks more than my wife. But we're not talking Anaheim. We're not talking hockey, unfortunately. We are talking Oregon Ducks. Man, as much as I would love to pick Idaho here, I just can't. Oregon's number 3 in the country for a reason in the FBS. They have the best quarterback in the FBS. I don't see any real shot at Idaho winning this game. I love to think, hey, this could be one of the biggest upsets in the history of college football. I just don't see it happening. If Idaho keeps it within 30 points, I'm going to be ecstatic about that.
Yeah, Dallas, the win for Idaho against Oregon week 1 is no season-ending injuries, and the game is at least competitive for a while. So yeah, Oregon's going to win that. I view week 1 as a soft opening for Idaho. It's get some guys some run. Probably not worry too much about how open that playbook is. But hey, Idaho's teams have only shown up for out-of-conference games. So again, to me, if Idaho can look competitive against a very good FBS team, I'm going to call that a de facto win.
In the comment section, Tom Kendall, Oregon 44, Idaho 21. Jason Mayer, Oregon 48, Idaho 13. Bradley LaPlante, Idaho versus the spread. Captain 58, bigger upset than App State, Michigan. Martin knows what's up. Nate Meek, 70-21, Oregon. Andrew Whipple, 52-10, Oregon. Ron Lowney, 5 losses for Idaho minimum. Ron, one more comment like that and you're going to get blocked. Just saying. Eck calling out Dallas in 3-2-1. Yeah, Jason, that's probably correct. Oh, somebody did ban Ron. Sorry about that, Ron. It was a joke, but Grandpa Brian must have misclicked, I guess. That takes us to game number 2, gentlemen. Wyoming. And the beautiful Laramie, Wyoming.
I don't know much about Wyoming. I'll be 100% honest. I know they were last coached. I think their coach, Craig Bull, former NDSU head coach, just retired and is in a new head coach this year, if I remember right. I'm going to go Idaho 23, Wyoming 21.
This is a tough one. So Greg Bull did step down. He's retired. His defensive coordinator, Jay Salvell, is the now head coach at Wyoming. Mostly kept the staff together, mostly kept the team together. But man, this one feels like maybe there's a chance if Idaho's going to pull off an FBS win. They've been very competitive in all of their FBS games under Jason Eck. This one feels like, hey, it's not Nevada. It's not an FBS win on paper only because that team was essentially a D3 school. But this feels to me like this could be it. If Idaho gets out of Oregon healthy, certainly feel pretty good about getting down to Wyoming and stealing a victory.
Yeah, Wyoming is the kind of FBS team I would like to see Idaho play more. Mountain West, solid Mountain West. I mean, I do prefer the dumpster Mountain West because I like seeing a 1 in that win column to start the season. So, Bradley LaPlante, and hey, Bradley, if I'm butchering your name, just type that out phonetically for me, dude. Says prediction for Wyoming is 6-7 overall. In the Mountain West, that'd be a mid-ish level team. Last year, the team finishes 9-4. New with defensive coordinator moving in as head coach, you wouldn't necessarily expect that means a radical shift offensively. Wyoming was a run-heavy team that should have lost to Montana State last season. So you just talent-wise, this is not like the Oregon game. This is a game Idaho absolutely could win. But I'm looking at Jason Mayer saying 35, Idaho 35, Wyoming 24. I'm looking at Max on Touche saying 31-24 Idaho. Those sound good. I do think this is I'm going to go with a loss here. I think it'll be something around what Tom Kendall's saying, 24. He says 24 Idaho, 21 Wyoming. I'm going to pick an Idaho loss, but I think it's going to be a very, very close game. Wouldn't be shocked if Idaho came away with a win and would be ecstatic for it. That would be really a clarion call to the entire FCS that the questions you have about Idaho, you don't need to worry about. But again, Wyoming's the kind of team who I think with some of the O-line questions we talk about, Jack Lane being, young as a starter, the first, this will be the second good team Lane will have played against. There's some variables stacked against Idaho. So yeah, I'll go Wyoming.
Game number 3, the return of U Albany to the Kibby Dome. Excuse me, the P1FCU Kibby Dome.
Oh, Idaho avenges the quarterfinal loss.
Yeah, Albany not going to be the same team that won in the playoffs there last year. Without knowing a ton of what Albany is replacing, again, this could be as silly as everybody could think. Hey, Idaho, they lost Giovanni McCoy, they lost Anthony Woods, they lost Hayden Hatton, they're going to be terrible. And we all obviously think that's completely wrong. But Albany did lose Poffenberger. He's off to the FBS. Their incredible pass rush. All of those guys have either graduated or transferred. I don't expect Albany to be anything scary to Idaho this go around. And again, as long as Idaho gets out of that healthy, I'd expect that first game in the Kibbe Dome is going to be an absolute barn burner.
Yeah, I'm going to go without much reservation. I'm going to pick Idaho here, largely because of, I mean, look, the thing that is most scary about Albany and Idaho was the defensive line last season, and it's a complete. This is a Control Alt Delete complete start over for Albany. So I think this is the first week that Idaho gets to really assert themselves by showing they're the national power we believe that they are, and the team believes it is. And I think with Idaho having as many returners from last year as they do, I think this game will mean more to the component parts of Idaho than it does for Albany. And yeah, I mean, for Idaho, the season for real, having to pull away a lot of wins without many losses begins week 3. I think there's a sense of urgency, and I think this Vandal team is ready to beat the shit out of Albany to avenge last season and to, announce that the season has started for Idaho football. So yeah, no problem picking Idaho in their FCS opener.
Pretty unanimous in the comment section as well. Everybody's mostly picking Idaho. A couple good comments here from Captain 58. Albany got some solid transfers in, but their defense was decimated by graduation in the portal. And then Bradley LaPlante jumping in to say Albany did get 2 good receiver transfers, but again, they don't have a quarterback to throw to them. So unless they've got a Jack Lane hidden on that roster, expect to see Idaho get their first home win of the year on September 14th. Game 4 at Abilene Christian University in Texas.
This will be like the last time Idaho played in Texas was against Lamar. Easy dub.
Yeah, I don't see anything about ACU that screams out to me as yeah, they might get Idaho here. It is on the road, which is tough, and they did go 9-4 last year, but I just don't see it. ACU, was 5-6 last year, not 9-4. 5-6 last year, just not a team I'm necessarily terrified by if Idaho is partially to mostly healthy. Again, if Idaho gets destroyed by Oregon, then this is going to look a whole lot worse a couple weeks from now. But if Idaho's healthy, I just don't see any reason to not come out of there with a fairly large victory.
Yeah, Abilene, you look through their 2023 season. Yes, the roster is different, but okay, this is the team that got murdered 52-14 by Southern Utah in late October. This is a team, though, that Tarleton State was better than Abilene Christian, but it's a team of that kind of caliber for the most part, as in like, hey, they're in the WAC, whatever the WAC is now. Certainly not a Western power. So no, this is I think this is going to be the second big win for Idaho. I wouldn't be shocked if it's anything at all like what Tom Kendall posts, Idaho 27, ACU 10, but one of those 27-10 games where, because Abilene is just iced out on the offensive side of the ball, that is a 27-10 game that feels like it's 42-13. So no, I think Idaho ends the out of conference season 2-2, 2 big playoff wins. But hey, every team probably needs an extra playoff win because it's a 12 game season, not an 11 game season this year. And that's what's going to launch Idaho into Big Sky Conference play. I actually kind of like that, having back-to-back FCS games to lead into the Big Sky Conference schedule itself.
Certainly better than getting absolutely spit roasted by whatever Big Ten school decided to beat Paul Petrino by 50 that week before just running right into the Sun Belt and getting buzzsawed because you're still recovering from injuries. Not that I have any sort of PTSD, Simon Miller. Not that there's any of that Petrino PTSD still hanging around. That takes us, guys, out of the non-conference. You know what, Brian? I think I'm thirsty.
Well, then you need to reach into your cabinet, which if you don't have any by now, man, I don't know what's wrong with you, and grab yourself either Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey or grab a Snake River 1915 small batch Canadian whiskey. You can't go wrong either way. Both of them, 3-grain Canadian whiskey, 80% corn, 10% malted barley, 10% rye. That's your first thing that sets it aside from pretty much any other Canadian whiskey you're going to find in Idaho State liquor stores. That 3-grain combination means the flavor is completely different. Second is double barrel finishing. Your entry level is for ages first in first fill bourbon barrels, and then it's finished in Oloroso sherry casks. The 1915 starts in those same first fill bourbon, but it's finished in ex-Canadian rye casks. The difference between the two, in addition to different finishing, is that your Snake River 1915 aged an additional 2 years. It doesn't matter which one you reach for. You can't go wrong either way. Both are great buys. Snake River Stampede at the entry level, fantastic buy. Snake River's 1915 at a step above, under $40, great buy. You can't go wrong either way.
I feel like I might have to plow through a bottle of that after the show, guys. And speaking of plow, Tim Plow now in charge of UC Davis instead of Dan Hawkins. Marten, first game of Big Sky play, September 28th at UC Davis.
I think Idaho finally gets their first win against UC Davis since rejoining the Big Sky.
This is where you guys are going to hate me. This one, I think this is going to be a loss. I don't love UC Davis, and again, I think it's the Dan Hawkins thing. Hopefully Tim Plow doesn't have the magic, but again, like you said, Martin, haven't beat UC Davis since dropping back down to the Big Sky. On the road, I don't love it. Idaho's not going to go undefeated. I'd love for them to do so, but I don't see them going undefeated in Big Sky play. And when you look at the schedule here, this is one of those games that's just, man, they have not had a break. You're talking 5 straight weeks here. You started off with Oregon, you end it with UC Davis, and then, I mean, you got, again, more and more weeks to go after that. But this one feels like this is the loss. There's not going to be many of them on the schedule, but I'm picking UC Davis to pull this one out.
There's some variables in favor UC Davis this game. Phase 1 is, hey, it's at Davis, but in addition to that, UC Davis just doesn't have to travel very much in their out of conference. They're on the road week 1 at Cal, which is barely a sure for them. Then, by the time they're playing Idaho, against Idaho, that's their 3rd home game in 4 weeks, with the previous 3 games all being FCS tune-up types of games. So you got that in your favor. I guess the thing that I'm going to view differently is I think Idaho I think they're objectively better than UC Davis. I think Davis is trending. They've been kind of static the last couple years, and which isn't to say they've been a bad team. They've actually been a matchup nightmare for Idaho the last couple of years. But I got a new coach replacing a very good coach. It would be shocking for me to expect that Tim Plow is not going to be a step above what Dan Hawkins had. Idaho defensively is going to be strong. It's a different defensive identity for Idaho than what we saw when Davis came into the Kibbie Dome in 2022. So my takeaway is I think Idaho is a better football team than Davis. So even though it's on the road, I'm going to pick Idaho. I think it's going to be a close game. But, man, Davis is an eye of the beholder team, kind of like Sacramento State is. And I think it's easy to round Davis up as a Vandal because we saw them beat Idaho 2 years ago. But keep in mind, Davis hasn't played in a single playoff game since that win. Idaho's played in 3. I just think there's a talent discrepancy. I think Idaho wins.
Just to hit the comment section here real quick, Patty Frakes, Larison is going to be a horse. That's where my money is. If Lane Larison doesn't play in that game for some reason, not a chance. But Leon Larison, best running back in maybe the entire FCS, much less the Big Sky. Bradley LaPlante, we beat UC Davis. We're strong versus the run, and that's their strength. 24-14 Idaho. Dane Moon, 21-17 Idaho. Tom Kendall, I'm with DH. UCD 28, Idaho 24. Jason Mayer, Idaho beats the Hawkinsless UCD 31-24. Max Antouche, Max, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name. Shoot it over to me at some time, man. 28-24 Idaho, and then Cap Dan 58 hitting the final point here. This game is going to have huge implications on the Big Sky playoff picture to start the year. I completely agree. That's why we're going to jump into an even bigger Big Sky game. Marten, it's all about the walk-up Sky Dome. I know how much you love it. Northern Arizona for homecoming. Unfortunately, they're coming to the Kibbe Dome. What are you thinking?
Idaho.
Yeah, no, I fully agree. Even if they went with their silly Astro Jacks thing, if they showed up as the Northern Arizona Astro Jacks, wouldn't matter. If they showed up as the Northern Arizona Crimson Tide, it wouldn't matter. Idaho is going to crush Northern Arizona at homecoming.
Yeah, I mean, NAU is probably the biggest unknown to me in the conference. New head coach, gigantic amount of transfers, which is to say, until NAU shows me there's a corner they have turned, I will not accept they've turned a corner. Side note, look at the schedule variables for NAU. They do get to open up the year with Lincoln, that always matters. But the start of the 2024 season is not kind to Northern Arizona after Lincoln, which doesn't count. It goes from Lincoln to University of Arizona, number 21 right now. Utah Tech's winnable. Incarnate Word's been playoff level team for a while. Sac State, Idaho, Montana. That's a run to have to go through to start the year. So I think there's every chance that some of the excitement of new coach is kind of worn off by some rough losses. So I'm going Northern Arizona, and I think this could be a big week in Idaho. Look, we just talked about UC Davis being tough, but hey, if Idaho can string some momentum into their schedule, if they can pick up wins against Davis and what I'm calling NAU here, that'd be 4 potential wins. That's the kind of momentum that can push a team to a new level.
Just to clean up the comment section, Captain 58, Davis should have been a playoff team, beat Sac last week of the season, but the committee gave the spot to Sac because of their Stanford win. BS that the week 2 win mattered more than the head-to-head. I might agree with you there on that, Captain. But as we hit the scores here, Dane Moon, 48-21, Bradley LaPlante, 58-14, Tom Kendall, 55-14, Jason Mayer, 53.3-1. I really like the math on that one. Simon Miller, Vandals, Pillage, Jacks. I mean, guys, it doesn't matter if they're the Astro Jacks, the Crimson Tide. Until there is a reason to believe otherwise, Northern Arizona is just not at Idaho's level. A team that is, unfortunately, at Idaho's level the very next week on ESPN2 at 7:15 at the Fightin' Ron Lowneys. Montana State, for those who don't participate in the YouTube comment section.
I think the run ends for Idaho. I think think this is one of Idaho's few regular season losses this year.
Yeah, same here. I don't see this being a game Idaho wins. I'd love for that to happen, but it lines up in a rough part of the schedule. Again, there's not a whole lot of breaks here for the Vandals guys until you get towards the end of the year. It's on the road. It's a late game in October. It's going to be cold. All of the little pieces put together, it feels like, again, Idaho should be a pretty good team this year. This is one of the hardest matches on the schedule. I feel like this is probably going to be a Bobcat win.
Yeah, and Montana State will have had a significantly softer schedule than Idaho heading in, which is just to say there's reason to believe or to understand why Montana State either feels more healthy or feels like the kinks they need to resolve. They've had a lot of reps to get through. So I think Montana State has revenge on its mind. I do think that Montana State's got to figure out, I think there's some offensive identity they do kind of have to resolve around Tommy Malot's use, but it's also not late enough into the year likely for that to be a huge issue. So I'm picking Montana State too.
In the comment section, Bradley LaPlante, 24-21 MSU. Too many games in a row. Injuries abound. I will be there repping the silver and gold. Tom Kendall, bring Ron back. I don't actually know where Ron is. I thought the timeout had expired, but Ron has disappeared.
There he is.
Oh, there he is. Montana State doesn't lose at home. Again, thank you, Ron. Again,
Didn't they lose in the playoffs this past year at home?
Yeah, but nobody, kicker problems.
They lost in a game that's being used as Exhibit A for why the FCS needed more seats.
Yes, 100%. Jason Mayer, Idaho with the upset 32-30. Tom Kendall, Montana State 35-24. Dane Moon 37-24. Simon Miller saying October better than November. Cautiously optimistic here. Healthy-ish Vandals pull off the upset. And then Andrew Whipple, Idaho 7-1 in Big Sky and make the playoffs, lose to the Cats, but have a tough game versus Bengals on the road to end it. Again, 7-1 in Big Sky play would be phenomenal. Max Antouche, Montana State doesn't teach spelling either. Sorry, Ron. You misspell things in our comment section, and we're going to make fun of you for it because we pride ourselves on our professionalism here at Tubs at the Club. Speaking of professionalism, guys, let's find a way to professionally talk about Cal Poly at home the week after Montana State.
I think Idaho wins this.
Professionally, I'm not going to call them Coward Poly. I am going to say they're going to get absolutely steamrolled. It is not going to be pretty, especially if Idaho loses to Montana State the week before. Leadership weekend is going to be all about leading fists through heads at Cal Poly. It's going to be bad. It's going to be ugly. Tom Kendall, 62-10. That's exactly where my head was at, Tom. This is going to be a big one.
Yeah, this will be a get-right game, you can call it. Idaho's. I don't think we're going to have – it's not that Idaho struggled with Cal Poly last year, but, it took a little bit of time to run away with it. I would in no way be shocked if after Montana State, Cal Poly 2024 looks like Idaho State 2023.
Yeah, in the comment section, Jason Mayer, 45-0. Max Antouche, Cal Poly's really good at school, but they're going to lose 70-3. And then Bradley LaPlante and Nate Mink, Cal Poly will have a good time at the Best Western. There's good coffee and not a bad breakfast. And don't forget about the pool. That's, again, if you're Cal Poly, you're looking to, hey, cool, Moscow, Idaho, pretty cool little place. That's, I think, the most they're going to get out of that weekend. It's going to be real bad. Vandal student Patty is no longer a student anymore, which is going to make this game really interesting to talk about. Eastern Washington Blackout the Dome Parent Weekend, October 26th.
I think this will be similar to the 2022 game in Moscow. Yeah, that sounds about right. 2022 game in Moscow. This time, Patty will be saying,
"Go Vandals."
Nope, at the end of it.
There's Patty in the comment section. Guys, this one's going to be really fun. I do think this one's going to be a lot of fun. I think Eastern's offense is probably going to be pretty solid again this year, as they always are. If their defense has taken a step up and they are going to be in the top half of the Big Sky, this could be a lot of fun. I also just don't see Eastern pulling it off in the Kibbe Dome with Jason Eck around. Just doesn't feel like a game they're going to win. Again, I know Patty's going to tell us how we're wrong in the comment section, but Brian, it feels to me, Eastern's going down.
Yeah, like Captain 58 says, big win. Chisco Cup stays home. Yeah, I mean, I know that Eastern feels like they're trending up overall. Feels like they could not possibly be worse defensively than they were in 2023, which is probably correct. But until we actually see that, no reason to expect that Eastern this late into the season is going to be hanging tough on the road against a top 10 team where if the season goes like we are kind of predicting it is, Idaho's an easy favorite. So yeah, I'm gonna go Eastern.
Hit in the comment section. Bradley LaPlante, 48-21. Tom Kendall, 37-24. Max Antouche, 54-21. Simon Miller, Kibbe Dome tames the Ingles. Steve Kurtz, Eastern continues to struggle in the Dome. Jason Mayer, Eastern has to forfeit due to an unfortunate incident. Christy Mayer's birthday weekend. Last year we beat MSU on her birthday. Big Vandal win in the Dome versus Eastern. Obviously, Patty Frakes saying this one's going to be very close. Dane Moon, Idaho 48, Eastern 35. Just feels like, hey, probably not going to do it, Patty. But hey, I like the optimism. Now, guys, it's the big one we've been circling the entire season. Idaho gets the bye week, and then off of the bye week, they travel to Hillsboro, Oregon for the top five Portland State Vikings.
Easy dub.
Yeah, we talked about this last week. Portland State is going to be absolutely ass cheeks this year. That is the worst schedule I've ever seen. They are going to be favored to lose by a fair amount in almost every single game, regardless of how good they actually are playing. I don't see Idaho losing to Portland State.
Yeah, it's going to be late enough in the year, too, that any sort of optimism you might have early on about how to turn the season around is done. Portland State's players know that there's no playoffs. They're more or less playing for pride, playing out the string. No, dude, that's an Idaho win. In our comment section, we got a lot of people predicting things are not particularly close. Nate Mink saying, Brian, did you just say you're going Eastern? No, picking Idaho in last week, but no, Portland State top 5 Portland State will not be close.
That goes to the final scheduled home game of the season. Again, if Idaho ends up with a bye, things could be a little bit different. But November 16th versus Weber State, it is Senior Day.
Idaho avenged last year's heartbreaking loss in Ogden to Weber State.
Yeah, I think the fighting barbecues are going to be pretty good again this year. I think their offense is going to take another step forward now that Richie Munoz is their quarterback. But I do think Idaho finds a way to get it done at home. I think it's going to be a pretty tight defensive game. But at home, Senior Day, Idaho expected at this position to be fighting for playoff spot and hopefully already have 7 wins locked in and be pretty locked into the playoff spot and now just fighting for seeding. Feel like this one's going to be pretty important. Feel like Idaho's got to take this one.
I am going to disappoint Vandal Nation. I think that Weber is a worse matchup right now for Idaho than UC Davis, largely because Weber State reports are that Weber State defensively is taking a step up relative to last year. And we know that there'll be a step up offensively because last year the issue that weighed down that offense has been resolved. Now, how much the loss of Abraham Williams is going to hurt Weber State? Real question. But I think Idaho is, I think top 8 is right. But I think it's the question for Idaho right now is if your question is, hey, is this a top 8 or is this a top 4 team? I think Idaho's still top 8. I think that's probably 2 Big Sky Conference losses total, and Weber State to me is the second Big Sky Conference loss.
Yeah, Bradley LaPlante and Dane Moon, the only guys in the comment section that picked Idaho by double digits. Everybody else saying Vandals with a close 1-possession game. This, again, I feel like is going to be a pretty good game, Brian. I think Mickey Mental finally has the program moving on the right track. Unfortunately, Treeb is not here to really hammer that in for us, but that circles us into the final game of the season against Division II Idaho State.
I think this one will be a lot closer than last year's game. Obviously, last year Idaho was trying to go for the top seed, but Idaho wins this one by, I think, 2 scores.
Yeah, I make the jokes about Idaho State being D2 and being so much just below Idaho, but McLean Westbrook flying in hot. Idaho State 56, Idaho 0. Potato State trophy comes home to the bank. I didn't know that marijuana was legal in Pocatello, McLean, but you got to get me your grower because that is some spice right there. Again, that's a big, beautiful trophy. Martin's got it up on the screen, but closer than last year could mean a lot of things. I think it's going to be closer than last year, but I don't necessarily believe it's going to be close. This feels like the Idaho State circling the drain, trying to find the positives at the end of year 2 and building for year 3 under Cody Hawkins, while Idaho is circling, hey, we gotta impress some people on the final weekend here to make sure that we get a seed.
Yeah, Idaho won 63-21 last year. It's hard to not have a game closer than 63-21 when Idaho probably could have scored 90 if that's what I wanted to do in 2023. I think that I said this last week. I think there's a glass half full, glass half empty read on Idaho State, and I like Cody Hawkins and I like what's going on in Idaho State. Until I'm proven otherwise, I'm a little bit more glass half empty on Idaho State. So I think their last big game is the week before against Eastern. I think Idaho, with a little extra urgency, feeling like they need to pick up a win to not only safely get in the playoffs, but still be in contention for the seed. I don't think it's particularly close to close the year. And yeah, I'm picking Idaho. I think the talent is there. You don't compare those two teams quite yet. And it's just going to be rough until Idaho State turns the corner. I think to close the year, that's just going to be a tough game for Idaho State, because it will, right now, the template is always Idaho playing for something huge and Idaho State's playing for pride.
I think the big point here is Captain 58. The only question is, will we rest Jack Lane and let a different QB2 torch the Bungles this year? At the moment, I would assume that's Jack Wagner, and this does certainly feel like this could be a Jack Wagner game, especially if Idaho is in really good position. Maybe Jack Lane makes a quick cameo appearance to drop a couple touchdowns in the first quarter and say, "See you guys later." One final shout out, Christy Mayer, 35-7 Vandals, with the Mayer fam on hand in Pokey to cheer him on. I'm guessing there's going to be a handful of Vandals that make it down there to that game. I wish you all in the best of time in Poke Hellhole. Brian, Martin, we've now gone through the schedule. I didn't keep tallies of what everybody was picking because I just didn't. I know I went 9-3, picked a loss to Oregon, loss to UC Davis, and lost to Montana State, all three on the road. So 9-3 Idaho, pretty solid.
Yeah, I went 8-4 with the losses being Oregon, Wyoming, Montana State, Weber State. Either that's still a playoff team. 8-4, 9-3. That realm sounds like the right expectation for where Idaho is relative to the new faces who they need to show they can play for the whole year.
And I'm just Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows with a positive attitude, going 11-1 with one loss to Montana State.
I mean, again, if I had my pick, Idaho would have a season exactly like Martin has laid it out. Ron Lowney in the comments, you timed me out for saying at least 5 losses, but unless Idaho wins the national title, then you agreed with me. He's technically got you there, Brian. That is 5 losses. Dayton Moon, Jack Lane, the Bengal Slayer, Jason Mayer, 12-1 lost in Eugene. Nate Meek, 8-4 would be amazeballs. Gentlemen, any final thoughts before we wrap up this preview?
I'll just come back next week for our for a preview of the Oregon game.
Well, first, patreon.com /
Oh, we forgot something.
Yeah, patreon.com / Tubs the Club. Support the show. Join the biggest cohort of online Idaho commenters, friends, fans at the #OnlyTubs Discord, which is also when we have them where we drop our inside #JustTheTips. So yeah, cost less than a cup of coffee. You want to pay more though, we will not stop you for a fact. So yeah, patreon.com / Tubs the Club. Or if you don't want to do the Patreon thing, we will gladly accept Venmo, PayPal, Cash App donations. Just hit us up at Tubs the Club on Twitter.
One final thing, shout out to Simon Miller. Thank you for the nice comment. I've missed this. Thanks, guys. The Tubs Discord is worth every penny. Do it. McLean Westbrook saying Idaho is going to beat ISU, but ISU goes 11-1 on the year. Again, love that hopium. Gentlemen, that's it for the preview. This is the final week, guys. Starting next week on, I'm assuming Wednesday. We'll figure that out though, and we'll let you guys know. We are back to our regularly scheduled programming. Wednesday, hopefully Wednesday, we're going to do the game preview as week 1 kicks off on Saturday. And then we go right into reactions. And then we've got 9 straight weekends with Vandal football. All we got to do is get through this weekend.
Which we'll get to after a 30-second Big Sky pick'em. Montana State at New Mexico.
Montana State by 20.
Forgot all about that, Brian. Thank you. Montana State by 17.
Montana State is a 10.5-point favorite. Bronco Mendenhall, new coach at New Mexico after New Mexico's garbage. I think they won 3 games last year. 60-some new players on New Mexico, which is to say no one in God's name has any idea what New Mexico is. But I think Montana State finished last year believing they left some wins on the table. They feel they're one of the rare good teams that truly 100% authentically feels they have something to prove. I'm going Montana State. And hey, when we're out of conference, any Big Sky team over an FBS team is big as far as reputation of the conference. So yeah, that's one of the 2 weeks a year I root for Montana State. So hey, go Bobcats this weekend.
But most importantly, guys, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.